Hi, everyone. Welcome to the joint Minneapolis-St. Paul Citizenship Day workshop. Today is September 17th, Citizenship Day. My name is Michelle Rivero. I'm the Director of the Office of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs for the City of Minneapolis. Edmundo, turn it over to you.
Hi. Thanks, Michelle. And I'm Edmundo Lijo. I'm an Assistant City Attorney, and I manage the St. Paul Immigrant and Refugee Affairs program for the city. Michelle?
So today, September 17th, is Citizenship Day. It is the day that the United States Constitution was signed. It is also it's Constitution Day. It's also a day to think about what makes us citizens, why it is important to be a U.S. citizen. And September 17th, this Friday, today, is also the last day of Welcoming Week, where we think about and focus on community and working together to create more inclusive communities. So I'll turn it over to Edmundo to talk a little bit more about Welcoming Week.
Since 2012, Welcoming Week has served as the annual campaign and celebration led by Welcoming America to showcase communities across the country striving to become more welcoming for all. This year's theme for Welcoming Week is Belonging Begins with Us, a declaration that everyone has the power to help others feel seen, embraced, and welcomed. Michelle?
An important way for people to feel welcome is to feel safe. And one of the most important ways to feel safe is by becoming a naturalized U.S. citizen. Becoming a citizen of the United States is very powerful and enables people to participate more fully in society. It's important also to know that you don't lose your cultural identity when you acquire U.S. citizenship.
We recognize that in our cities, there are approximately 9,000 St. Paul residents and approximately 10,000 Minneapolis residents who haven't taken the step to become U.S. citizens. The cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul strongly support efforts to acquire citizenship, and clarifying the application process is a way for us to do this.
When cities invest in naturalization efforts, this benefits all of our city's residents, from individual benefits like eligibility to vote, ability to obtain better jobs, increase in level of home ownership, to increase municipal tax base, entrepreneurship, and job creation, in addition to public safety and family stabilization, as naturalized citizens are protected from deportation.
Today, we are happy to welcome representatives from the local immigrant and refugee service provider organizations who are here to walk us through the citizenship application process. Corleen Smith is the Director of Immigration Services at International Institute. Jennifer Stoll-Powell is Legal Director at the Immigrant Law Center of Minnesota, and Juliana Cadavid Vaughn is an immigrant advocate and supervisor in the Office of Multicultural Services in Hennepin County. Thank you for being with us today, and welcome.
We're so grateful to have such wonderful service providers here with us today. And to start us off, I'll invite Corleen Smith, again, Director of Immigration Services at International Institute, also an accredited representative with the Office of Legal Programs through the Department of Justice. Ms. Smith has over 20 years of experience working in the areas of refugee resettlement, DACA, permanent residency, and U.S. citizenship. So Corleen, thank you so much for being with us today. And I know you're going to start us off by walking through the naturalization application process. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Michelle. It's great to be with all of you today. This is a really important step for many people as they go through citizenship. And I'm just going to share with you a little bit about what's involved when you are applying for citizenship. And don't worry if it gets a little bit overwhelming, because we're going to talk about each of these parts in more details. I'm just going to kind of give you the big picture of things. So when you think about applying for citizenship, there are a lot of steps involved. And again, this is just kind of a brief overview, so stay tuned for kind of all of the details. Of course, the first step when you're thinking about citizenship is trying to figure out if you're actually eligible for citizenship. That's a big part of it. So even before the paperwork begins, you definitely want to figure out am I eligible to apply for citizenship? And again, we're going to talk about that more in a little bit. Once you decide that you're eligible to apply for citizenship, there of course is an application that needs to be submitted to the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services Office. This application is very lengthy. It's about 20 pages. And it asks all different kinds of questions about your addresses, your jobs, your family, information about spouses and children, and then it also asks about your past, any kinds of maybe police issues you may have had, or what immigration talks about as good moral character. So the application gets completed and then it gets submitted to the immigration office. Once it gets submitted to the immigration office will be corresponding with the person that's submitting the application to inform them of what's happening with the application. So usually after you submit the application, you get a receipt in the mail from immigration notifying you that the application has been received and it's in process. After that receipt, you will have a fingerprint because immigration is making sure and verifying your background history and any possible police or legal issues you may be having or have had. Once the fingerprints are completed, immigration is going to schedule you for an interview. This interview actually happens in downtown Minneapolis at least for the people in our area. It happens at the immigration office in downtown Minneapolis. You're scheduled for a specific date and time to go to an interview. You meet with the immigration officer and in a private space in their office, and you are reviewing your application with the officer to make sure that all the information is correct and everything is up to date. The immigration officer is also reviewing any maybe red flags or questions they have about your application. And you may also have the requirement of English, history, and government test. And again, we'll talk more about that requirement for English testing and also answering history and government questions. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. Once the interview is completed, and usually the immigration officer will tell you that you have initially been approved if everything looks good, and then you would go home and you're going to wait a little bit longer for a notice and a decision from immigration. Hopefully everything has gone well, and if it is approved, you would be scheduled for an oath ceremony and you would see a judge, and the judge has the authority to make you a citizen and possibly change your name if you requested a name change. And at that oath ceremony, you are also receiving your official citizenship certificate that shows that you are now a U.S. citizen. So those are a lot of steps involved, and as you can imagine, the timeline to complete all of those steps currently is about 1.5 to 2 years. As with many things right now, because of COVID, the timeline has definitely increased from what it was in the past. So we always want to remind people that are interested in applying for citizenship to plan ahead. Once you submit the application, like I said, it's going to be about 1.5 to 2 years from the time you mail the application to immigration until you have that final step with the judge and receive your citizenship certificate. So again, very important to plan ahead and take a look at your green card for more information about when you're eligible to apply. And again, your green card may also be expiring. So that's another important factor to consider when you're thinking about citizenship. I think that's everything for the moment from my end. And again, we're going to talk about all of those details that I mentioned when you're applying for citizenship, because again, there's a lot of different steps that are happening during those 1 to 2 year process.
Thank you, Corleen. That's very informative. Appreciate it. Next, we're going to be hearing from Jennifer Stoll-Powell, and she's going to speak to us today a little bit about the importance of speaking with an attorney or an accredited representative before you apply or fill out the application for citizenship. Jennifer Stoll-Powell is the legal director at the Immigrant Law Center of Minnesota. Since April of 2019, the Immigrant Law Center is a nonprofit agency that provides immigration legal assistance to low-income immigrants and refugees in Minnesota. Jennifer has handled a wide range of immigration cases with a focus on cases for victims of domestic violence and violent crime. She previously worked at Southern Minnesota Regional Legal Services, SMIRLS, for over 20 years and supervised SMIRLS immigration in farm worker unit for over 13 years. Thank you. Jennifer?
Thanks very much, Edmundo, and good morning, everyone. I'm really happy that you're here learning about the process of becoming a United States citizen. I'm going to talk about why and when it's important to talk to an attorney or an accredited representative who's recognized by the Department of Justice. Because there are things that can go wrong in this process, and you want to be aware of them upfront. You really want to make sure that you're eligible to become a U.S. citizen, as Corleen shared a few minutes ago. So we're going to talk just briefly about what I call red flags and things that you really need to talk through with an attorney or an accredited representative. And I'm going to just say a little bit more about that, because what does it mean to be an attorney? You want to make sure it's someone with a valid law license. You can ask to see their attorney license if you want. We're happy to show it to anyone who asks. Or someone who's accredited by the Department of Justice, which means they work at a nonprofit that's gone through a process to become recognized, and that they've gone through a process to show that they have the experience and the knowledge of immigration law to provide advice and to serve clients in immigration cases. So it's really important that you make sure that when you are consulting about your case and your eligibility for citizenship, that you talk to an attorney or an accredited representative, and not someone who would be referred to as a notario, a notary, who does not have that training skills license to provide legal advice. We want to make sure you get good advice and you know that you're eligible when you move forward on your application to become a citizen. So I'm not giving immigration advice now. I am just talking about some of those red flags that can come up, just so that you know some of the things that might cause a problem or might impact eligibility. It doesn't mean that you're not eligible. You just need to talk through these things with an attorney or accredited representative. And the first one, the one that really comes up a lot, is criminal history. So if you have a criminal history, a criminal conviction, you know, it could be a ticket, although minor traffic parking tickets usually are not a problem. But there are certain types of convictions that can cause problems, and we want to make sure that we're looking at that to make sure it won't be a problem for you that could lead to deportation down the line. So if you've had any kind of run-in with the police, with the law, anything related to theft, robbery, for example, writing bad checks, any kind of fraud conviction, domestic assault, violation of an order for protection, any kind of drug crime, driving while intoxicated, DUIs, firearm offenses. These are just some of the things that can cause problems for people who have their green cards, who are permanent residents. And so we want to make sure we talk through it with you. We'll want to see the records. Sometimes that includes the arrest reports and the court records, but we would talk to you about that and make sure you're getting the information that we need to review to make sure you're eligible. So we will be asking, have you ever had any problems with the police? Have you ever been in a police car? Have you ever been arrested? Have you ever gone before a judge, been convicted? You need to disclose all of that information, even if you've expunged your criminal record. Even if you've told it's been closed, that you don't need to tell people about it, you still need to talk to us about it, because expungement for criminal purposes is very different than what it means for immigration. Immigration wants to know about anything that's happened including things that have been expunged from your record. So please make sure you're sharing that information with your attorney, with your representative, so that we can give you good advice about eligibility and review your full criminal history. So that's the first red flag that I'll touch on. I'm going to just touch briefly on some others. Failure to support children. If you have minor children under 18, you need to be supporting them. It especially becomes an issue if you're not living with your children or if there's a child support order. And if there is a child support order, we're going to be asking about that, making sure that you are paying child support for that. Immigration fraud. We're going to ask about your immigration history, how you came to the United States, talk about what program you came under, and make sure that there's no fraud, that you never gave false information during that process. You never lied to immigration. You are eligible for that benefit when you applied. So we will talk about your immigration history. If you're male between the ages of 18 and 25, you are required to register for selective service in the United States, regardless of your immigration status. So this applies even if you are undocumented. You have a requirement to register with selective service, and we will be checking on that to make sure that you did that during that time and talk to you if, for example, you didn't register. We'll talk through that with you and how that could possibly impact your case or not. False claims to U.S. citizenship. If you have ever told someone that you are a U.S. citizen for a benefit, whether it's to work, maybe to get a hunting permit or some other type of state license, we are going to talk to you about that because it does have an impact on your ability to become a U.S. citizen. If you've ever lied and told someone you are a U.S. citizen when you are not yet a citizen. Taxes is another issue. You are required to file your tax return if you earn enough income. And if you haven't, when you are required to, that can also affect your ability to become a U.S. citizen. So we're going to ask, have you filed your taxes? Did you pay any taxes that you owe to the government if you owe money to the government? And if you do owe taxes, are you in a payment plan? And are you making payments to the government to pay off your tax debt? So be prepared for those questions. Other things that can also come up if you've ever been engaged in prostitution, whether that's arrest or a stop by police for prostitution. Polygamy as well, having multiple wives in the United States or the intention to have multiple wives in the United States. In addition, you are, if you have ever registered to vote or voted in any election, whether it's a local, state, or federal election, we will ask you about that because that can also impact your ability to become a U.S. citizen and to be eligible because you are required to be a U.S. citizen to vote in federal elections and most state elections as well. We will talk to you about how long you've been in the United States and where you've lived, especially for the last 5 years, because you're required to show residence, continuous residence in the United States and physical presence where you've applied for citizenship. So if you've made any trips outside the United States, make sure you know the dates that you left the country, the dates you came back in, so that we can talk more about those trips and if they impact your residence status. Because if you're gone for a long period of time, immigration is going to assume that you abandoned your residence in the United States. So any trips over 6 months, up to a year, you're going to have to show that you didn't intend to abandon your residence in the United States. So you'll want to make sure that you don't take those long trips outside the United States and that you can document when you left, when you came back into the United States, because that information is included on your application for U.S. citizenship. Public benefits fraud, if you've ever lied or given false information to be eligible for assistance, is an issue. Also, helping someone enter the United States without permission, entering illegally across the border. And if you've ever provided support, it can include money, food, to an organization that the US government deems to be a terrorist organization. That is also another red flag. So again, this is a list of some of the red flags. There are more questions on the application, but I'm just hitting on some that we've seen come up for our clients, probably more frequently than some others. So if any of these things are things that would apply to you, you do want to make sure that you talk to an attorney or accredited representative and get good advice before you apply to become a US citizen. Again, the information that you share with your representative is confidential. You need to disclose all the information so that we can provide you the information about whether you're eligible to become a US citizen. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Jenny. Really appreciate that overview, the highlighting the importance of seeking competent assistance, and highlighting some of the red flags in the application process. Our next speaker is Juliana Cadavid Vaughn, who is an immigrant advocate and supervisor at the Hennepin County Office of Multicultural Services. Juliana has a master's in public administration from Hamline University. She also has a law degree from the University of St. Thomas Law School. And for the last 10 years has focused on advocating for immigrants who file affirmative applications with US Citizenship and Immigration Services, including naturalization, adjustment of status, and replacing, renewing green cards and employment authorization documents. So Juliana will be talking to us a bit about barriers to obtaining US citizenship and resources, including addressing waivers. So Juliana, I'll turn it to you.
Thanks, Michelle, and thank you for having me on. Today, I'm just going to mention two of the most common barriers I see in my work when people want to naturalize and become US citizens. So I'm going to start with the English barrier. To become a United States citizen, to pass that test and interview, you need to be able to speak English, so go through the interview in English, read and write English, and be able to answer up to 10 questions of US history and government, which is what Corleen touched on earlier. If you speak English, if you can read English, write English, that's no issue, and you can go through the application. If you've been here, there are certain exemptions that exist. So if you've been a permanent resident for 20 years and you're at least 50 years old, you get a specific exemption from the English part of the test. So you don't have to read or write English, and you can have an interpreter in there with you to interpret the questions into your own language, but you still are required to take the civics test with the help of the interpreter in your own language. And that exemption also extends to people who are at least 55 years old and have been green card holders for 15 years. Same deal applies there. You don't have to take the written or reading portions of the test, but you still will need to answer up to 10 civics and history questions. If you're over 65 and have been here for over 20 years as a permanent resident, you are also exempted from the English test, and you have a special from the English reading and writing tests and speaking, and you have a special consideration for the civics and history test. So instead of having to study the 100 questions and being asked 10, you'll only have to study 20 questions and be asked 10. So it's a significantly shorter, fewer amount of questions to study. If you're unable to comply with the English requirement or don't fit into those age and residential requirements for having a green card, you may qualify for what's called a medical certification for disability exception, sorry. So that you can have a licensed medical doctor, licensed osteopathic doctor, or clinical psychologist fill out one of these forms. if the reason that you can't comply with the English test, spoken, written, read, and the interview and the civics questions, sorry, if you have a physical or developmental disability or a mental impairment. So the doctor, in the cases I've seen, doctors usually interview and test the patients that they're working with over a course of several days or several appointments to kind of see why the person is unable to learn any of the exams. So it could be, the person is blind, so they can't read. They might have USCIS may offer an accommodation for that. Or if they're deaf, USCIS may offer accommodations for that. So it could be anything that impairs you from learning that information. It does take quite a few trips from the clients I've seen, the residents I've worked with, it takes quite a few trips to the licensed professional to kind of get one of those completed and make sure that it's something that is satisfactory to U.S. Citizenship and immigration standards. The next big barrier that I see with people, and I think is pretty common as well, is the financial barrier. So becoming a citizen is not cheap, especially if you have, a husband and a wife or adult children. The naturalization application costs $640 plus an $85 biometrics fee for a total of $725 per person. There is, so that isn't paid in cash. It can be paid by credit card if you file online, or a check or a money order made out to the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, all spelled out. There is a fee waiver request and a fee reduction request, which I'm just going to go through really quick. So the fee waiver and the fee reduction have to be filed with the application. So when you send it into USCIS, the fee waiver request or the fee reduction request need to be sent in as well at the same time. For a fee waiver, you qualify for a fee waiver if your household adjusted gross income is less than 150% of the federal poverty limit. If you're receiving means tested benefits, so food support, MFIP, those both count as means tested benefits, or if you can prove that you have a financial hardship. For any of those three scenarios, you have to submit evidence. So you have to submit a letter from Hennepin County saying you're eligible for food support in the amount of X amount of dollars starting on such and such day. If you're going to base it off of your income being lower than 150% of the federal poverty guideline, your 1040s need to be sent in, or ideally a tax transcript, so that USCIS has that evidence on hand. For a fee reduction, you can qualify for a fee reduction if your household income is between 150 and 200% of the federal poverty guideline for your household size. So it's people who, for a long time, there was no fee reduction. You either qualified or you didn't at 150%. So this gives a little buffer. And if you do qualify for the fee reduction, it's half off of the application fee, so half off of the $640. So it would be $320 plus the $85 application fee for a grand total of $405. Again, a fee reduction must be sent in at the time that you file your application to USCIS with the proof of what you're stating on there. So they're going to want to, USCIS is going to want to make sure that your taxes are in there, or a tax transcript. And if there are changed conditions or something where your tax transcript, it doesn't necessarily equal your current income, you're going to have to explain kind of that discrepancy that they'll be able to find on the paper. And that's all I have for those two barriers. Thank you.
Thank you, Juliana. It's very important. I think talking about these barriers makes it even more important that people understand that you really do need to talk to a lawyer or accredited representative before you apply for citizenship or even think about applying. It really is helpful because you may qualify for a fee waiver, you may qualify for a waiver of the English or civics exam, but you know, we as the cities of St. Paul, Minneapolis have recognized that there are barriers, and one of the things we are trying to address are the barriers and assisting people to get around those barriers. And one of the things that we've done in St. Paul, just this past Wednesday, we announced a partnership with Affinity Plus Credit Union that we were creating a citizenship loan program for qualified residents of St. Paul who may want to apply for naturalization or other immigration benefits from the USCIS, but are not qualified for a fee waiver or a fee reduction. This loan program will become available sometime next week, late next week. And with this program, it will be a no interest loan, and qualified residents who are over income for fee waivers are going to be eligible to join the credit union for, I believe it's a $25 fee, or in some cases you may qualify without the $25 fee, and then it's a $75 loan application fee with $50 of that fee returned to the borrower once the loan is paid off. So you'd be able to borrow that $725 fee over the course of a year and pay it back over time. So if you're a resident of St. Paul and are interested in applying for a naturalization and may qualify for no interest loan program, you can reach out to me at my email address, which is edmundo.liho@ci.stpaul.minnesota.mn.us. Michelle? Oh, you're muted, Michelle.
Sorry about that. So thank you. Just wanted to say that in addition to the providers who we have with us today, both the city of Minneapolis and the city of St. Paul have additional information about other providers who can assist in filing applications for naturalization and ensuring that our residents have access to competent immigration legal services. And I see that Edmundo is going through the slides for our different presenters, and I'll ask if it's okay for each presenter if you could just talk through your slides. So maybe Edmundo, if you could go back to the last one for a quick second, and we can have
Yes.
yeah, super. Corleen, if you could talk through that slide quickly for us, that would be wonderful. And then we'll just move on to the other speakers too.
Sure, thanks. So International Institute, we do help people to apply for citizenship. You need an appointment. Currently, because of COVID, we are helping people over the phone, and then there's a short appointment for you to come into the office after that initial phone appointment. And the best way to get the process started for citizenship is to contact our office at that telephone number, the 651-377-8642. That's our intake line. And if we do not answer, please leave a message and we will get back to you usually in about 1 to 2 business days. You can also check on our website. You can also put in a little brief information about yourself, and that's another way, if you're more comfortable accessing the internet, you can go to the internet and also put in information about yourself, and then we can also respond to you that way as well if you prefer, letting us know you're interested in citizenship that way.
Thank you.
Thanks, Corleen. Jennifer, do you want to give us a brief description of your office?
Sure, thank you. To become a client of our office, please call our intake line. You can call either of the numbers on the screen to speak to one of our intake specialists. They will ask you some basic information, including your income information, but also some basic information for eligibility for citizenship. For example, they'll ask, have you been a permanent resident for 5 years Or if it's less, are you married to a US citizen for at least 3 years, so that you're eligible based on that time period to apply for citizenship. So be prepared for those basic questions. And if it looks like you're eligible for our services, you will get scheduled for a phone screening appointment for a more thorough screening. Typically, those appointments are run through our pro bono department, and then we decide if it's a case that we can place with a pro bono attorney who would handle your case for free, or if it's a more complex case or for a different reason, we will handle it in-house and it will be assigned to one of our attorneys or accredited representatives. So I've listed the intake hours here as well, which have changed a little bit in the last few months, but this is our current intake schedule. So please feel free to call our office during one of these times to speak to an intake specialist. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Jennifer. Juliana, would you like to go through your office's contact information?
Sure. So this is the contact information for navigation and information services in Hennepin County. On the top, you can see our website, and that's just where you can get information about OMS, the specific office I work at. You can always, for questions, email oms@hennepin.us, and that email is checked regularly. The phone number to access the immigrant advocates in our office is right here. It's 612-348-2193. If you are a resident of Hennepin County and are already working with a case management assistance from our office, or a navigator, one of the department navigators for human services, you can just let whoever you're working with know that you'd like to be added onto the immigration waiting list. And when the waiting list opens up, the staff person from Navigation and Information Services, or OMS, that has that information will enter it into our waiting list. Otherwise, at the current moment with COVID, you have to be connected to a case management assistant, a CMA, or a department navigator to reach the two immigrant advocates directly. All of these services provided are remote, so it's all over a telephone and USPS, so the mail. And wherever we can, we'll do things electronically as well. So if you can send documentation to us via email, that would be a lot quicker than obviously using the postal service because it's instantaneous. But yeah, if you have any questions, please feel free to call 612-348-2193, and we will get you connected to one of the two immigrant advocates whenever we get whenever we reopen our waiting list. Thanks.
Thank you, Juliana. Michelle, would you like to tell us a little bit about your office?
Sure. Before we close out, so the Office of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs for the City of Minneapolis has been in existence for 3 years, and we, among other things, help to connect City of Minneapolis residents who are in need of immigration assistance with legal service providers who can offer those services. If people are interested in learning more, you can go to the Office of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs webpage simply by typing in OIRA Minneapolis into any search engine, and you'll be able to see an overview of the office, a link to the legal service providers that we work with and partner with. My contact information is 612-394-6018, and I welcome people who have follow-up questions relating to naturalization or other immigration matters to contact me. Thank you. I'll turn it over to you, Edmundo, for closeout. And thank you so much to Corleen, Jenny, and Juliana for being with us today and for giving such important information to our community.
Thanks, Michelle. And similarly, in St. Paul, our office, the St. Paul Immigrant Refugee Program, is a program which is dedicated to assisting immigrant refugees to integrate and become part of the civic, economic, and social life in St. Paul. And as part of that program. We have a legal defense program where people who are detained by ICE can receive legal representation, as well as the new loan program and other programs we'll be initiating in the future. Again, to reach our office, you can reach me at my email address, which is Edmundo, that's EDMUNDO Lijo, LIJO, at ci.stpaul.mn.us. And I also would like to thank our presenters today for being with us today. Thank you so much for taking us through how to apply for U.S. citizenship. We hope you have found this workshop beneficial and are encouraged to apply for U.S. citizenship, and we look forward to seeing you all as U.S. citizens sometime soon. Thank you.